Alrighty. You guys hear me?
Yes.
Welcome, welcome. Happy to have everyone here. If you are joining us today, that means you're interested in data integrity, data hygiene, and best practices. So we're very happy. We have prepared a very interesting slide deck and content to go over today. Um, and yeah, we're looking forward to getting started. I'll pass it on to Josh to kick us off today.
Mhm. Jose, do you have the slide deck up?
Yeah, can you in the back end, can my team please present it, the slide deck presentation, because I'm sharing it right now. There you go. We start presenting this here.
All right. So, as Jose said earlier, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. We're going to be walking you through some of the best practices, some tips, tricks, why this is an important topic, and ways to solve this. To quickly do a round of introductions here, Jose, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, so I'm Jose, I'm CRO and co-owner here at Triario. Triario has been for over 14 years working with HubSpot, implementing the CRM, integrating it, doing all the heavy data cleanup type of hygiene projects. So yeah, I've been there from the last couple of years and very happy to be here.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm Josh Damagala. I'm the sales director for North America. My experience goes back about 7 years total in sales, but I've been in the HubSpot ecosystem for about the last five. Half of that was spent directly at HubSpot, and then the other half has been on the agency side, where it's really helping customers bring their reality to life and bring certainty to what they're trying to accomplish.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Lavenstein. I'm the Customer Success Manager at Triadio. I've been managing high revenue enterprise accounts for the past 8 years. I have expertise in e-commerce and SaaS, and I'm very excited to bring that to our clients at Triadio.
So for today's agenda, we're going to break this presentation up into four distinct pieces. So the first being is, why is this topic important? Basically the implications of that, some things to consider that maybe you'll see in yourselves, right, in your own organizations. The second part of this will be that now that we actually know what the problems are, how do we actually go about solving it? And then three, how do we make sure that once we put in all this work, we're starting to see results that we want, that we can actually mitigate the risk and put in processes in place to avoid all of this? And then we're going to open up the floor to you all too to ask any questions at the end. So to begin here, of really three core pain points, if you will, of why this issue matters and what it means for organizations. The first thing here is really that messy data is going to really equivalent to missed opportunities. So what this could mean is a variety of factors, right? Where if we don't have good data in there, maybe from a sales perspective, we don't know what deals to actually focus, right? Or from a pipeline perspective, where they're really at in the process and what we need to do to move them forward. From a marketing standpoint, maybe we don't have good leads in there that we need to be able to qualify and actually pass over to the teams to work. Ultimately, having bad data, what it's going to come down to is you're not really going to know where to spend your time. And then because of that, you're going to put it in areas where you couldn't, where you could be reinvesting that into the business and really become more productive from that. So one thing that's important here too is with trash in and trash out, really when it comes to data, it's going to be as good as you let it be. So if we're putting in bad data, we can only expect that the results are also going to be bad from that. So what that's really going to lead to is bad reporting, maybe workflow automations that don't work. And, no matter who we are or what we do here, we do have to present this data to somebody else for like the health of the organization, whether that's C-level, maybe people that work for us, board members, all of that. And when you have messy data, it really starts to muddy the waters of, hey, what should we be doing from like a strategic guidance standpoint? What should the next initiative be? And then also budget allocation, right? Like where do our true pain points actually lie and how can we solve them? So ultimately what this is going to amount to is that clean data is going to equal better decisions where we can move the business forward in constructive ways, get everybody on the same page and make sure we're doing as well as we can. So some of the impacts that we have seen from across our client base we've worked with over the past 15 or so years is that really when it comes to outdated CRM data, this is backed up by a couple of metrics that we pulled too, is that we're seeing 20 to 30% of it for one reason or another is actually becoming outdated quickly. So that could be maybe contact data of somebody who had, switched jobs. Maybe they weren't actually interested. Maybe they were. Maybe they had converted in some other way. Maybe a deal had stalled. But also from a reporting standpoint, or maybe some things that metrics, KPIs we had cared about the year prior or quarter prior that's tweaked a little bit, and we're not really up to snuff on what we should be. So kind of think of this like your house, right? Where your CRM is like that as well. If we're just not having processes in place or tools to help manage this, the clutter keeps getting higher and higher to where we can't see the floor anymore or even the walls, and we're losing sight of what's actually important to us and what we're trying to accomplish here. So what's a natural side effect of this is it's going to be campaigns that are going to be hurt by this, of really not understanding who's truly in our database, who they are, what they care about, and how we can reach them at the right time through behavioral data points, but also intent to really meet them where they're at in their process to maybe ideally nurture them for a conversation or get them to convert a little bit sooner. And then ultimately what this is going to fall onto is closing deals, right? Which attributes to more revenue for the business, which gives you more room to play when it comes to maybe additional hiring, reinvesting in your product, right? Doing all of these things, because what we really see is that it's going to help you understand from like a better prioritization standpoint, what deals or leads make the most sense, as well as just lead qualification too. So you're going to be able to spend less time on manual tasks that are bogging things down and reinvest that into critical areas of the business. So these are a couple of quotes that these are also real customers of ours, of projects that we had done for data cleanup of them and why we actually did that. So from what we've been talking about so far, none of this is probably brand new, right? So I won't spend too much time here. But one of the big ones was, right, that the sales team stopped trusting the CRM because there was too many duplicates and missing info. So why that mattered from a business standpoint was that they ultimately just weren't using the CRM, that one they were putting money and time into, but also from a reporting, forecasting standpoint, it was difficult to understand what was going on, and all things were in disarray. It was almost like the Wild West, if you will. Same thing for this next point, where it's like 4 different versions of the same contact. Well, who should we actually be targeting? Once again, this is going to bog us down, because if we don't know who we're supposed to be targeting, how can we possibly start to have realistic conversations with them, getting them into our pipeline, and ultimately becoming a customer that's going to pay us money? And also from a customer experience standpoint, where we've seen this to where it's somebody who had been a client of ours for, X amount of years or whatever that could have been. And these were challenges businesses were facing, because if you don't know how to interact with your client base, that's going to become problematic, because they'll look elsewhere for a better service, whatever that could be. And as most of us know, right, the customer acquisition cost is a lot higher for somebody new than retaining somebody existing too. So this is a gold mine if handled well. And then lastly is just the nurturing as well. And then Jose, can you zoom in on this slide? It looks like it. Yeah. And then running a report felt like rolling the dice, right, where the numbers never matched. What's the point of having one source of truth where a lot of the business operations are supposed to be ran out of, as well as, reporting that up the ladder or even down the ladder too? If you don't have good data, you can't make good actionable decisions based on that to really move the business forward. So lastly, now that we know sort of the cause and effect of how this comes about, like what are the actual triggers for that we can look out for? So first and foremost would be no data process definition, right? So a tool is really only as good as its implementation, and the implementation, the foundational piece of that at least, is the actual process that goes into it. So it could be as something simple as, hey, like when we have a contact in here, what's the key data that we need to be filled out? If we want to move something from deal stage 1 to 2, how do we enforce that with the key points that we know to where it's actually qualified to that stage? The next part here is the actual data governance. So once we have the process in place, how is that actually going to be enforced? So really there's 2 factors that are coming into play here. One part of this is there needs to be some internal ownership on this to where somebody is actually putting these processes to use. And so with that being said, what we would also need to is the correct process and structure for that, so that people are educated on what they actually need to do. So with that education on the process and the internal enforcement, that's how you can start to circumvent this. And then lastly, going back to the last slide, how we saw 20 to 30% of CRM data is becoming outdated on average in a yearly basis. If we let this sit for 2 or years more, we're almost reaching full capacity of everything we had, where we actually can't trust that. where that's pretty alarming. So we need processes in place here to make sure that we're keeping our house as clean as possible to move forward as we need.
Yeah. Thank you, Josh. Then I guess we can all agree that that's the business impact and that that's important and some of the sources and the causes why that happens. Now let's move on how do we fix that, right? So we have created a framework of 5 specific steps, starting with defining the cleanup rules, deduplicating, record association, re-import, and data enrichment. Each of these steps is required when fixing or optimizing your data hygiene and data cleanup. It is not the ultimate solution. There are items and things that need to be prevented, and we're going to speak to that after that. But starting with defining rules definition, then one thing that is very important is deduplication rules. So when you are going to clean up and deduplicate your records, what are the properties that you're going to be using? So is it going to be the email, the phone number? Is it going to be a combination of the first and last name? What is the key property? It changes per business. It's not as obvious as you might think. HubSpot uses email addresses as the native key property for contacts. For companies, it uses domain, but many companies use different key properties for matching duplicates. There's also something very interesting called fuzzy deduplication, which is matching similar records based on a combination of multiple properties. But we're going to speak to that later. 2 is when you merge contacts, companies, or deals, when you merge records, what's the winner loser override criterion? That is it if I'm merging these 2 records, I have 2 Jose's in my database. Is the winner going to be the last updated, the first created, the last created? Is it going to be more complex than that? Like, is it going to be the first created, but if this property is empty on the record A, but it's filled out on record B, then keep record B. So those will be more complex and customized override rules. And 3, deletion rules. When am I allowed to delete a record? That could be when the contact record has no name and last name, or it could be companies with no contacts associated or deals with no amount. Define that, because this is going to be the framework and the criterion that we use moving forward. Step 1, define your cleanup rules. 2, start deduplicating. So there are 2 ways that you can go on this. One, you can deduplicate using HubSpot, or you can deduplicate using other tools. If you are using HubSpot, the the only way to do it actually is using Operations Hub. If I'm going to exit here just for a second, if you are here on HubSpot using Operations Hub on the data management portion of it in data quality, you will be able to access contacts and companies. HubSpot provides a view of the potentially duplicated records. I can choose among these records, and I can see, for example, that is saying that Wendy Chica and Wendy Chica are a potential duplicate based on first name and last name. It uses several data points like first name, last name, and email address. And once you want to accept that, you can click on that one or multiple of them and just click on review. And it asks you for what's the winner criteria. Is the winner going to be the one with the oldest engagement, the one with the most recent engagement, the created first, created last, or most recently updated? So it gives you these options right here as for winner loser criteria. And once you choose the right one, you just click on merge all, and they're going to be merged. But again, going back to our rule definition, if your rules were more complex than that, then the HubSpot Operations Hub wouldn't be the ultimate solution to that. There are other tools that you can use, like Deduply. Deduply allows you to establish more complex deduplication criterion and customize that and suggest potential duplicates based on your custom duplicate rule definition. I hope that makes sense. If you have questions at any point, just type it down here in the chat. We'll be happy to address that at the end of the session. And I know some of these conversations tend to be a little bit technical. But step 2, Deduplication, right? You can do it on HubSpot, you can do it in other tools. I like doing it on HubSpot because our deduplication criteria is not very complex and it keeps everything in one place. Step 3, associations. And I'm not gonna put this on slideshow because I'm gonna be jumping between tabs. So bear with me for 1 second here. Actually, when you had those two records and you merge them together, you now want to add and associate the actual companies or deals to that so that your records can to be related one another. I have good news and bad news for you. The bad news is that there is no way to do associations on a in bulk or yeah, like in a massive fashion. You have to export that data, do it manually, and then import it back or use APIs. So ultimately, what that looks like is when you use HubSpot and you have multiple records. Let's say that I exported all this, and let's pretend that I had already fixed those duplicates, and I'm not only going to be working on one of these records. I can take that record and associate it to a company, and all of the properties here to the left will be the properties related to the contact, right? And all the properties here to the three to the right will be the ones associated to the company record. So I can change the association. I need to keep both record IDs, and that is the way that I'm going to make that happen. When I have associated the record ID of the contact with the record ID of the company, I can go back into HubSpot and perform an import of both contacts and companies. So I choose this two, click on next, I upload the file, I map all the properties here. You will see that on the first portion of this property mapping, there are contact properties, and on the lower portion of it, company properties. And I'm using the record ID for the companies and the record ID for the contacts. And then I can finalize the import right there. Again, not getting into the weeds of how to execute this. Yeah, let me just present it here. Sorry, make it larger for everyone. Present. Someone was saying that they needed to see his zoom in a little bit. I hope that's better now. So associations. Again, step 3, associations have to be done by exporting the data and then re-importing it to HubSpot. We actually covered the other step, which is the import back into HubSpot. Keep in mind that that can only be done via spreadsheets or via APIs for robust and more complex associations and type of work. We see many times when customer has like hundreds of thousands of records, the best and most efficient way to do that is actually connecting the API and doing all that work in a bulk fashion. All righty. So after that, we are going to delete the records that we don't need. How do we delete records? Again, you cannot delete records with a spreadsheet either. So you want to do that manually in HubSpot. But the most efficient way to do that is flagging and marking all the records that are going to be set for deletion. So 2 tips here. The first one is you want to use filters that match your deletion rules. That is, for example, contacts that haven't been engaged with my marketing emails in 3 years, in 6 months, for example, or 1 year. Contacts that don't have name and last name, companies that don't have owner or don't have information, you name it, right? Define your deletion, go back to deletion criteria. At some point, when you were doing all the associations here, it happens every time. When you're doing the associations on the spreadsheet, you will notice that some of those records are not actually legit. So this is a good time to use a property. So we use this one called mark this for deletion, is a custom property, and we flagged it as yes. This property is an identifier, and after we import it back into HubSpot, it would allow us to create a filter, a list and a filter to delete all those records. So ultimately, going back to HubSpot, what we're going to be doing is creating a list and manually just deleting all those records. Okay. You see that it all ties back to the cleanup rules. Let me go and present again. 1 second here. Finally, data enrichment. Data enrichment is you have cleaned up all of your records. You have associated them the right way. You have re-imported them back into HubSpot. And now some of those fields might still be empty. You have cleaned up the pre-existing data, but maybe you need new data as of like region, industry, addresses, role, you name it, phone numbers. Enriching that data is something that can either happen on HubSpot or out of HubSpot. If you are using HubSpot, Breeze Intelligence can enrich that data right when you are importing. The last step of a data import, you can click on enrich data and it will enrich your data. If you're using, you can alternatively use other tools like Zooming for Apollo. So it natively integrate to HubSpot, and you can turn that data sync to enrich those records. Keep in mind that Breeze Intelligence syncs and enriches a set number of properties. You can find that here in the knowledge base. So there's these properties right here for contacts, and this one for companies. Again, of other tools like Zooming for Apollo might have more data points than that. But I find it if your needs are not as complex, then Breeze Intelligence might be enough for you. I will say, though, that data enrichment is not always something that you get from a third-party tool. Sometimes the data enrichment has to come from you. Like, we see many clients coming with deals that don't have any owner. Who knows what is the owner of that specific deal or company or contact? Sometimes within the heads of our customers. So getting that out of your head and establishing that, you'll have to go back to whenever you're doing the associations on the spreadsheet. That's the best moment to nurture this and fix that out. Add those phone numbers out at the owners. There's some manual enrichment that very often happens, and this is the time where you want to do that. Going back to the presentation here, the last portion is how to polish data and archive properties. So once you have said all this, I hate how in Microsoft you have to start all over every time that you share your screen. There you go. So once you have cleaned up all that data, there are other tweaks and things that you can do to optimize the data hygiene. The first one is you have to check all the properties in each object, contacts, companies, deals, custom objects, and look for unnecessary properties to archive. There are many of those properties after you have done that you just don't need there. So you can identify it and just archive them. Keep in mind that if you want to archive those properties, you have to remove them from the views, workflows, reports, and anywhere where that property is being used, you have to remove it from there before you actually are able to archive it. 2, on the definite process, check all workflows that might be affecting them and fix them, turn them off. Workflows are also one of those assets that can be associated to properties. So you want to turn them off or remove the properties before you remove the properties from the workflows before you actually archive the property. Correct property formatting like names or other relevant fields. Just capital letters for names and stuff like that. Those formatting are important for marketing purposes. You can do that with Operations Hub as well. And overall, this whole thing that you're seeing here, that data polish process, is also expedited with Operations Hub. If you use Operations Hub, there's a whole menu called Data Quality right here, where you can see all the you can create rules like if there's any duplicate, you will see formatting issues. I have 4,776 records with formatting issues, 3,000 records with duplicates, missing data 17,000. You can set up rules like if any contact doesn't have a first name, that is a missing data trigger. So we're showing here. So you establish those triggers yourself if you want to. And overall, you just see the health of your properties, data, workflows, and everything. So it makes everything very easy to identify where to click and things to fix from one whole dashboard. And I know that was a mouthful, but in summary, As for the steps that you need to take, these are the tools that you can use. For deduplication, you can use HubSpot. You can also use Excel sheets, and other tools like Dedupli work very well if you have complex uh, data cleanup rules. Okay. Second, associations. Your associations cannot be done within HubSpot. That you have to use Excel, and some other tools like Dedupli also support some level of associations. Uh, deletion has to be kind of like a manual process that you do on HubSpot, but you need to mark those contacts or records into lists to make it to expedite the whole thing. So although it's manual, you still do it in bulk from within HubSpot. Data enrichment, you can use Breeze Intelligence inside HubSpot. In Excel, there's still some data enrichment that you do manually, like assigning owners to past deals. And yes, you can also enrich your data with ZoomInfo or Apollo. And finally, archiving and correcting the format of some of your properties is something that you can use in HubSpot using Operations Hub Pro as well. I hope that was helpful. And if you have any questions, please write them down. We're going to go over that here shortly. And I'll pass it over to Michael.
All right, thank you, Jose. So when we're speaking to our clients, we always like to ask them what their pain points are, what their goals are, and then what the bottlenecks are that are preventing them from reaching their goals. And as you saw earlier, these same customers that we have had earlier on, they said that, for example, they stopped trusting the CRM. They had different versions of the same contact. They couldn't trust the reports. And themes that really stood out to us, for example, are, trust. They want to be able to trust their CRM to help them manage their processes, to help them manage, for example, whether it be in customer service, on their customer service team, on their sales team, et cetera, to help better manage your clients, as well as trusting the reporting. And if you can't do those because your data isn't clean, that's going to really hinder trust within the company, but also with the clients as well. So, for example, these same clients, after working with us, they were able to regain trust. They were able to, start using HubSpot and trusting HubSpot, which is really important. Trusting that what they see is accurate, as well as, reducing the amount of noise as well. That is a major theme that we noticed too, is when there's a lot of duplicates, that creates noise. Now, when you're able to reduce that noise, you're able to, of course, be more effective within your processes. Now, moving on, sorry, give me 1 second. Perfect. Now, it's important to prevent, bad data from entering, HubSpot. It's important to build data quality considerations when you're transitioning to HubSpot. So, step one, of course, is to make sure that you're defining your key processes for your sales team, service team, et cetera. So it's important to, clearly map out the steps a lead or customer usually takes within your system. And then after that, it's important to identify what the required information is at each stage of the process. And then once you go from there, you'll be able to implement those roles in HubSpot effectively. So, for example, utilizing required fields on forms, setting entry or exit criteria for different pipeline stages, etc. And then by doing that, you'll be able to ensure that you have more reliable data for decision making within your internal company processes.
Yeah, well, I want to add to that, and this is very important, Michael, that we always like to start from here, actually. And it is by defining the process that we identify where the gaps or the holes are. Many customers have certain definitions for forms, but they don't have clear definitions of the property enforcement rules along the process. So when they pass it on to their sales team, they do whatever they want. So at the end of the whole process, when the contact became a customer, half of the data is empty. So that is very important. And also, when you have things like an integration, some integrations are connected there, but there is no clear black and white definition of the properties and the fields that need to be mapped throughout that integration. And sometimes that integration affects a process very deep into the process, like a deal at a certain stage. So something pretty much like this. And by that point, then it screws up the whole process because all the properties that were enforced or required inside HubSpot prior to that are still going to be empty. So that is very important. As for process definition, it is the foundation of a good data clean hygiene execution.
Great. Moving on, in terms of data governance policies, creating these policies and creating, those persons within your team that will be taking ownership of different aspects of the data migration is really important. So, it's always important to create like a clear written policy that the whole team understands of how the data should be managed in HubSpot. And as well, as I mentioned, defining how those standard custom objects are used and assigning the data ownership by team. As well as when it comes to the hygiene, you have to make sure that there's rules set for deduplication, what fields are going to be required, and how are you going to handle those inactive records. Moving on, the lifecycle management. You want to establish who on the team has permission to create, update, or delete records in HubSpot. And when you're establishing those guidelines, you'll be able to, of course, comply even with privacy regulations as well. In terms of the integrations, it's really important to control how that data flows between HubSpot and other tools as well. So, you want to define the rules for how the API should be used, what property requirements exist for the data moving between those systems. And then last but not least, making sure that you're monitoring the quality. So making sure that your team has a routine for checking the quality of the data frequently. So if you have to do recurring audits and cleanups, then that's something that we would highly recommend. And defining those steps for how those checks or those audits will be carried out.
And before we move on to the last portion, which are question and answer, I would say that we recommend our customers run at least one data cleanup process per year. Just data gets outdated very quickly, so at least once a year is recommended.
Great. So now we're going to move to the Q&A portion. We have a lot of great questions here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just read the question, and then either Jose or Josh will be answering the questions. So the first question we have is from Angela Vergara, and she asks, can you explain the difference between importing and integrating data into HubSpot? And when would you typically choose one method over the other during a migration process?
So I can take this one, Jose. So it's a good question, and it's a question we get a lot. So the difference between importing and importing is really more of like a one-time thing, where integrating is going to be ongoing and continuous. So for example, maybe you would want to do an import when you are doing a migration, or you want a contact list, something like that into HubSpot. So when I would choose one method over the other, it's really going to come down to the frequency of the need, right? So if it's going to be a one-time thing, or maybe every now and then, like every few months, something like that, that's when an import would make sense. But if there's multiple systems that you want hooked up into HubSpot and you need like a continuous flow between the two, whether they're constantly being updated for like, example, if a deal closes one, goes to another software for like project management, then you want to report back onto that in HubSpot, that's when you would want to go for an integration.
Great. Thank you for answering that. All right. The next question will be from Guillermo Rojas. What are some common data quality issues to look out for in HubSpot? And what built-in tools or features can users leverage to identify and fix these problems?
Okay, so some of the data quality issues to look out for are missing properties. That is the most common one. You should have a black and white definition on what are the required properties for every record. A very basic example is every contact should have a first and last name. We can go beyond that. I always tell my customers, if you want to have ownership or you have prospecting processes in place, then an owner is also required. All of your contacts should have an owner. And when you define those requirements, you can easily filter and identify which records are not meeting those requirements. So that could be missed properties inside a record, that could be missing associations, or that could be a wrong format inside a set of properties, like a phone number, for example.
Great, thank you. Next question is from Andres Gaviria. How should we plan data cleanup and moving to HubSpot so it doesn't mess up our CRM, marketing, sales, and service data?
So the first thing that you would want to do in this case is start by either internally or having an agency like us actually audit the data of what you're actually going to want to bring over to understand the current data structure of it, and then maybe understand where gaps would be. So that would lead into point two, which is then actually getting the correct data structure down of how you would want that to look into HubSpot. And then once we have that, we would want to prepare it for import. So HubSpot has certain guidelines that you're going to want to follow. This is usually done through like an Excel or CSV, where we're basically going to have the key information, where it might be a contact record, right? So it's like first name, last name, email address, all that other good information that we care about. Make sure it's structured in there. And then finally, what we'll do from there is actually upload it into HubSpot and then map it into there with the correct properties. So kind of going back to what we were talking about, I think it was on slide 3 or 4, where it's like garbage in, garbage out. Following this process is actually going to get us good data from the get-go, so that way we're starting clean and we have what we need to start hitting the ground running.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question is from Ryan Darush. What are some smart ways or tools to find and fix those more complicated data errors in HubSpot, like when contact info doesn't match or deal stages are all over the place?
That is a very good question, actually. There is no single answer to that. We normally have to go back to the customer and ask for their intuition. For example, let's say, if we don't trust the deal stage on some of the deal records, then I might want to guess, for example, one stage is quote sent. So any deal that maybe has a quote associated to it, I will assume that the quote was sent, for example, and just update that stage for that one. Or if the deal has been open for way too long, maybe that's not a valid open deal. That should be closed lost. So there should be some level of some internal definitions based on the internal business rules, and you can always set up workflows to update those records accordingly.
Great, thank you. Next question is from Salem Climber. And they say migrating my sales and marketing data from Salesforce and Marketo to HubSpot is giving me a headache. What's the least painful way to do this and keep my data intact?
The best way to migrate your data from tools as common as Salesforce and Marketo to HubSpot is using a native integration. HubSpot provides pre-connected tools in the marketplace that you can connect to, and you can just push information back and forth between the two systems. You can just turn it on once, bring the information over, and just turn it off. So it would expedite the whole migration process for you.
Awesome. And then last but not least, Charlie asks, will there be a recording of this presentation?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to share this recording via email to the email that you sign up for. And this is also going to be published on our blog. And you will have access to, we're going to be sending a follow-up email coming from our personal emails. So you can also reach out to us anytime if you have more questions or want to get deeper into this conversation. We're always happy to elaborate and continue the conversation with our customers.
Great. And are there any other questions? We'll give it just a quick minute for anyone else to ask some questions.
All righty. Well, I appreciate you joining today. We have we like to host this type of webinars and conversation about the technical portion of HubSpot. I would encourage you to follow us on social media and just sign up for our newsletter. We provide very valuable content like this on a regular basis. And if you have a project at hand that has this level of complexity, data hygiene, or anything related to HubSpot, we will be happy to help you out. And there's another question right there.
How do you keep HubSpot data clean? Sorry, this is from Jessica. How do you keep HubSpot data clean and reliable after migrating? So reports, automation, and the customer experience stay top-notch long-term.
Okay. I will answer to that. The short answer to that is defining your process is the first step, and forcing your data intake is the second step. And up to that point, 90% of your data hygiene should be resolved moving forward. The other 10% is still the way that your team does the thing that you cannot control. Like if they put a typo in their names or if they missed a number on the phone number and stuff like that. That 10% has to be done with the regular cleanups. So do the process that we mentioned, and that's going to solve 90% of it. And the other 10%, just schedule some recurring cleanups.
And one additional thought to that too, which goes into the process of why they should be doing this and what it should look like, it's the education component, right? Because if somebody understands why they should be doing it this way and they see the value in it, that's what's going to make them actually do it.
That's a very good call, Josh. We actually name it the framework that we work with when implementing CRMs is this: for these projects to be successful, we need processes, a clear definition of how the process looks like. 2, technology, implementing all that process inside a CRM like HubSpot and connected with the other tools. And 3, people. The people component requires training. People needs to be trained to how to perform those tasks, and that's going to mitigate those errors too. All right, team. Well, thank you again for joining us today. We'll be looking forward to having you on our next webinar. And just send us an email if you have any other questions. But for now, have a beautiful rest of your week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.